I was driving alone from northern Washington down to southern Utah to meet my family. It was supposed to be simple, just a few days around the holidays, nothing fancy. The road trip itself didn't bother me. What bothered me was the stop in the middle. I needed a cheap place to sleep for one night, somewhere roughly halfway. I searched through listings the way tired people do, quickly, carelessly, focused on price instead of comfort. I didn't need charm. I didn't need views. I needed a bed, a shower if I was lucky, and a door that locked. That's how I found the cheapest option in Idaho. The listing was short and plain. It promised a small cabin and a quiet night. The location looked like a pin stuck in a blank area on the map, far from towns, far from anything. But the description said it was just a mile off the highway. Convenient, easy, perfect. I booked it without thinking too hard. By the time I neared the area, the sun was dropping. Idaho around me turned into long stretches of dark forest, the kind where the trees feel like a wall rather than scenery. There weren't many lights, no real signs of people, just highway lines and the faint sense that if your car died out here, you'd be waiting a long time for help. Then my phone told me to turn. The exit wasn't an exit, just a narrow break in the trees, like the forest had been torn open. No street light, no sign, just a small dirt road vanishing into darkness. I slowed down, half expecting I'd missed it, but the GPS insisted, so I turned. The dirt road was rough and uneven. Gravel snapped beneath my tires. Branches leaned overhead like they were trying to close the path behind me. For a full mile, I drove at a crawl, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. The forest around me felt thick, heavy, and alive with unseen movement. Birds settling, small animals shifting in brush, wind making the trees whisper. And then the cabin appeared. It wasn't small. It was bigger than anything I expected. A long structure tucked in the trees, more like a lodge than a cabin. No outside photos had been shown on the listing, and now I understood why. The place looked old, and in the dark it looked even stranger. Wide, quiet, and somehow watchful. I parked close to the front door, relieved to finally be done with the drive. That relief lasted about 3 seconds, because the door opened. Just opened, quiet and sudden, like someone had been waiting for the exact moment my footsteps reached the porch. A man stood there smiling too widely, like his face had learned the shape of friendliness but not the feeling of it. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. My heart slammed into my ribs. I forced out a laugh that didn't match my body's panic. He stepped aside as if he'd been expecting a guest, as if this was normal. "I'm Charlie," he said. "Owner." I blinked at him, confused. Owner? Here? Why was he here? The listing hadn't mentioned anyone living on site. He must have seen the confusion in my face, because his smile stretched again. "Your room's right over here." That single word hit me like a bucket of cold water. This wasn't a private cabin. This was a room inside a cabin shared space. A shared building in the middle of nowhere with a stranger. My brain instantly tried to argue, no, I wouldn't have booked that. I would have noticed. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt trapped by the situation. It was dark, the road back was isolated, and I was tired, so I did what tired people do. I told myself I must have clicked the wrong thing or missed a line. "Okay," I said quietly. Charlie led me inside. The hallway was long, too long, and strangely dark. No lamps, no ceiling lights, nothing welcoming. The only light came from the living room in the distance, where a television glowed faintly like a dull eye. He walked ahead without turning on anything. His steps were soft, like he knew exactly which boards creaked and which didn't. We reached the last door at the far end, the furthest room from the entrance. He handed me 2 keys. "One for the front," he said. "One for your room." He smiled again, held it just a second too long, and added, "Enjoy." Then he walked away down the dark hallway, disappearing so smoothly it was like he'd never been there at all. I shut the door behind me and dropped my bag on the bed. The room was plain, not terrible, but my stomach had that tight feeling, the one that tells you your body noticed danger before your mind did. I tried to rationalize. It was Airbnb. It had reviews. People stayed here. It was fine. I unpacked only what I needed: charger, toothbrush, a change of clothes, keeping everything else in my bag as if part of me already expected to leave. A few minutes later, there was a knock, right on the door. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I hadn't heard any footsteps. Felt like he'd been standing there the whole time. I opened the door only a crack. Charlie's face was right there, smiling. "How's the room?" he asked in that too bright voice. "It's great," I said, forcing my tone to be polite. He nodded slowly. "Good. Holler if you need anything." I said thanks and closed the door, but I didn't move away from it. I listened. Not the kind of silence that means someone walked away. The kind that means someone is still standing there, breathing, waiting. My skin prickled. Finally, after an uncomfortable stretch of time, I heard soft footsteps retreating down the hallway. I locked my door, and for the next 30 minutes, I sat on the bed with my phone in my hand, listening to the cabin like it might speak. Eventually, I heard the TV turn on in the living room. The sound was muffled but steady, the kind of noise people use to pretend they aren't alone. I used that as permission to relax. I brushed my teeth. I checked my bag. Then I stepped into the bathroom and turned on the shower. The tub looked old. The tiles were stained in a way that made you wonder if they ever truly got clean. The curtain at least looked newer, one of those semi-transparent ones that turned everything beyond it into blurry shapes. I tried to shower fast. About a minute in, I heard a sound. A dull thump from outside the room, like a footstep or a shoulder bumping into the wall. I leaned away from the water and listened. Then, through the foggy curtain, I thought I saw a shadow shift in the bedroom. Just a smear of motion, unclear, but enough to spike fear through my chest. I yanked the curtain open. The room looked empty. I stood there staring, towelless, water running, heart loud in my ears. After a moment, I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe headlights outside, maybe the TV flickering through a crack under the door. I finished quickly, got dressed, and walked back into the room. And that's when my blood went cold. The bedroom door was slightly open. Not wide, but open enough that it had clearly moved. I knew I had locked it. I rushed forward, slammed it shut, and locked it again, my hands shaking so badly the key rattled. For a moment, I just stood there, back pressed to the door, breathing hard, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. There wasn't. I grabbed my phone and opened the Airbnb listing, hoping to find comfort in other people's words. Something like, lovely host, safe, quiet. There were only 3 reviews, all 5-star, all short, all written in the same strange tone. Too perfect, too generic, like they'd been created rather than lived. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop even further. The listing did not say shared cabin. It said entire cabin, standalone, private, yours, meaning this wasn't a misunderstanding. Either the listing was lying or something had changed, or I had walked into a situation that was never meant to be normal. I didn't want to find out which. I packed fast, not caring about neatness. Just shoved everything back into the bag, zipped it hard, and held it like a lifeline. Then I went to the door and pressed my ear against it. The TV was still on in the living room near the entrance. But beyond that, there was a different sound. Not from the hallway, from inside the room with me. First I thought it was the heater, or the pipes, or the house settling. But then it became unmistakable. Low, uneven, close, coming from the closet area. Every nerve in my body lit up. My mind didn't form a plan. It only formed one command, go now. I didn't scream. I didn't investigate. I didn't try to be brave. I flung the door open and ran. I sprinted down the dark hallway, past the living room. The couch was empty. The TV played to nobody. The front door was there like an exit sign from a nightmare. I burst outside into the cold air, scrambled into my car, and started it so fast my fingers fumbled the ignition. Then I drove, down the dirt road, over rocks, too fast for safety, too fast to think, just fast enough to survive my own fear. When I hit the highway, I didn't slow down. I just kept going until the road felt like civilization again. I called my mom with a voice that didn't sound like mine, and she convinced me to report it. The report went nowhere. Nothing physical had happened, nothing provable, no clear evidence. But the investigation did confirm one thing: the listing was false. The host wasn't even named Charlie, and the cabin was taken down. For weeks afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about that breathing, how close it sounded, how real it was, and what might have happened if I'd hesitated, if I'd convinced myself it was nothing, if I'd decided to be polite. Sometimes survival is just trusting the part of you that knows before you do.